As may be obvious from the content on my channel, I spend a lot of time online browsing for watches. When I find a model I like, or that I feel deserves highlighting, not only am I weighing up a purchase, but I'm also considering how and where I might discuss it on the channel. That is a lot easier for some watches than others, because they fit neatly into broader categories. Some are so populated that it's hard to whittle down. I've got so many watches in consideration for my Japanese list that the mind boggles. However, others are comparatively very niche. So I've decided to make a video focusing on watches that hail from smaller nations around the world. The rules for the video are as follows. Each model featured must come from a smaller nation that isn't usually renowned for its horological prowess. The watch must be available for less than $1,000 price point, and each nation, and therefore brand, can only feature once for the sake of variety. To educate ourselves a little geographically while we browse, I'll feature the flags on each cut section and show you where the countries are on the globe, and give you their population stats as a bit of a bonus. I'm also going to start a new little feature on these list videos where I award one model with an impulsive watches recommendation. The best watch of the video, in other words. With all that said, let's broaden our horizons together and get into the video. One common issue you'll probably spot for yourselves with the list is that there is a bit of a markup involved with these models. And in part that's going to be because of the logistical costs involved in importing parts or complete watches into and out of what are sometimes relatively remote locations. The Pioneer is a good example of this. It's designed in Barbados and from a Barbadian brand, but given the lack of further detail available beyond that, I think you could be forgiven for assuming that the actual production is taking place elsewhere. You're getting a citizen quartz movement, sapphire crystal, stainless steel, and 100 meters of water resistance with this model. These aren't bad specifications, just not ideal for the price point. Nonetheless, a handsome enough timepiece with a patriotic caseback. There are two watch brands from the Maldives, but one only makes watches for women. So given that YouTube tells me that the audience of the channel is 100% male, that doesn't make much sense to feature. The other brand are known as Maldives Wave, and they sell a range of watches inspired by the islands themselves. I can't say that I've ever bought a watch with imagery on the dial before, but the promotional images for these ranges do a fairly good job of making me consider that position. What the brand definitely needs to work on is the detail of their specification listings, as there isn't even sizes on there. Still, a neat little watch with some island charm to it. I can imagine a world where this would appeal to patriotic island dwellers and holiday goers alike. I visited Luxembourg a few years ago, and given its wealth and status, it won't come as a surprise to anyone that most of the watch shops in the city stock some very expensive models, and if it doesn't have Swiss made on the dial and a hefty price tag, you're unlikely to be seeing it in any kind of shop window. Luxembourg does have its own premium brand, the recent start-up Duke. But those are, shall we say, challenging to look at, and given their extremely limited numbers, even more challenging to find a price for. Instead, I've looked towards the budget end of the market with favour. A brand whose unique selling point, besides being perhaps the only budget watch brand in Luxembourg, is using wood for their cases. I can't say that I've ever considered a wooden watch before, so I featured this grey wolf model because I thought the process used was interesting. Essentially, you can take wood and strengthen and waterproof it with steel. I'm not technically minded enough to properly explain that process, but I like the look of the end result. Wood isn't exactly a fine and delicate watchmaking material though. these are big watches at 45mm in diameter, so only the biggest of wrists should even consider it. It won't come as a huge surprise to find that a nation as small as Iceland does not have a huge number of watch brands. What they do have is JS Watch Co., the nation's first and only watch manufacturer, who hand assemble all of their models in-house in Reykjavik. The issue with that is the cost. These handmade watches start at prices well above the limit imposed by this video. That is where the ARC-TIC brand comes in. They're an offshoot, still operated by JS Watch Co., and it gives them a presence at the more affordable end of the market. They've been in operation since 2013, and I've chosen to highlight their nature-inspired range, which features colourways inspired by an element of nature in Iceland. Red for the lava, blue for the icebergs, and green for the aurora. Now, I won't lie, there is a premium involved here. $230 is a lot for a simple quartz-powered dress watch. So, as with many things in horology, it all comes down to how much you value the branding and heritage involved. I'll also say that having visited Iceland in the past, it really is like nowhere else on Earth, and well worth a trip if you haven't been. The Temptation 3 is a somewhat awkwardly named automatic GMT dive watch with a ceramic bezel, Seiko NH34 movement, lumen over lume, and AR coated sapphire crystal. At the start of the video, I discussed how I noticed a bit of a markup for watches being designed or produced in smaller nations. I think the Aegean deserves some praise for being better value than a lot of models on this list. Though of course I know it's possible to get these specs for less elsewhere. The design is also fairly unique, even if the colour scheme is screaming James Bond Seamaster. Given that these watches are yet to release and are also a limited run, the fact they're available on sale already doesn't really bode too well. For me, I think there are three issues at play here. The strap doesn't match the model all that well, the hands are a little stubby, and perhaps crucially, the lack of a brand logo is an issue that doesn't make the most of the available white space. I am going to keep an eye on the brand though. I think with some further refinement, future models of this watch could be really appealing. While I'm sure a lot of viewers will have heard of Vostok before, you might not know that since the early 90s, Vostok-Europe has been operating entirely separately out of Lithuania. These are big, really big, chunky watches tailored for the largest wristed people. The model I've chosen to highlight is 47mm in diameter and 15.4mm thick. It would look comical on me, but as my wrist is just below average in size, I think there will still be plenty of interest in watches this large at the opposite end of that scale. The real selling point of this model is the bronze case, which has been aged up in some of the promotional material and looks frankly stunning. For the gamers out there who will appreciate this reference, it put me in mind of the aesthetic of BioShock. As far as Lithuania goes, one of their signature dishes, which I'm probably going to pronounce horribly wrong, Kepta duona, is an absolute must try. Not remotely healthy, but positively delicious. Singapore has a comparatively large population compared to the rest of the list, but the landmass on which it sits is absolutely tiny compared to some of the other countries featured. It is impressive, therefore, that there are actually quite a few different watch brands operating in the region, with Boulder, Zelos and Vario being some of the most well known. I have a full review of this model available on the channel already, and I'll leave a link to that down in the video description if you want more information. Given its geographical position as a transport hub in the Far East, it's perhaps unsurprising that compared to the competition on this list, they can offer significantly better value for money. I was tempted to give this model the impulsive watches recommendation, but of everything on the list, I think you're far more likely to have heard of a brand like Zelos before, so it goes a little against the premise of the video. I'm going to exclude it on that basis, but it's a great watch nonetheless. Now, despite the name, I think it's actually contentious as to whether or not this is truly a brand from Monaco. The company's contact address is in the US, but they are licensed by the government body Monaco Brands, whose role it is to conserve Monaco's global reputation. So at the very least, these watch models are Monaco approved. These watches basically have everything you'd want in terms of specs, looks and materials. However, they are a little too big for me at 42mm, and the pricing is all wrong. Sapphire crystal, a Miyota 8215, 316L stainless steel, 100 meters of water resistance, a butterfly clasp, and AR coating all sound great. The logo design and colour choices are all great, but the issue is the value proposition. The fact is you can get these specs elsewhere for a lot less. But then again, Monaco is known as one of the most expensive places on earth, so there was always going to be a premium involved. I'll just start by saying that you can get versions of this watch from just over $300. This limited edition model is over double that price, and I would assume that a big part of that asking price is associated with the official NASA branding you're seeing on the watch. I have a real soft spot for NASA. In my opinion, it's the coolest brand in clothing that you can get from a brand that isn't really anything to do with clothing, and I think it's a nice addition to see on a watch too. The Space Ranger is made from stainless steel, coated in a white Cerakote ceramic and polymer mix. It has sapphire crystal and comes with 3 different coloured fitted rubber straps. It's powered by a quartz OS21 Miyota movement, which is of course fantastically accurate, but it's not exactly the best value from a $729 purchase. The design is quite clearly a Nautilus clone, but you won't be finding a Nautilus that looks quite like this. The final watch on the list is also the one that I'm going to be giving my first recommendation to. Earlier I spoke about the Temptation 3 from Aegeon, and I said that there was a possibility for a really nice watch there with a little more refinement. While I don't think the Pacific Waterman is perfect, it does feel like a more refined version of a similar design with that squared case and GMT functionality. It also has the potential to age in the same way shown as the Almaz bronze, though the Waterman is still on pre-release, so there aren't any nice patinaed images to see just yet. What you're getting in terms of specs is a case made from CU-SN8 brushed bronze, C3 Swiss Superluminova, a 9075 Miyota automatic caliber with a jumping hour hand, sapphire crystal with AR coating, and a screw down crown and Vuitton gasket, allowing the watch to be rated to 200 meters of water resistance. It's a strong spec sheet. The only slight drawbacks are, as a deep diving watch, this is quite thick at 14mm and quite bulky with a 49mm lug to lug. And as Mubert do have quite a nice company logo, I'm not sure why they haven't opted to use that on the dial. The reason it's getting the recommendation is far more simple than any of this though. I think it's by far and away the most handsome model I've featured in this video. To conclude, I think with a list like this, it's quite difficult to be fully objective, because I can only imagine that brands bearing the imagery, logos and colours of your place of birth or heritage will speak to you far more powerfully than if you don't relate to them in any way. Personally, I think it's inspiring to see so many individuals and companies investing time and money into what is essentially a passion project to help represent their homeland, and whether you like the watches or not, I think that is genuinely commendable. If money were not a stipulation of the video, there are quite a few other brands from tiny nations that could have featured, and I'd be interested to hear your suggestions for other models that could potentially have been in this video in the comments section below. I'll just finish by saying that if there are fewer images and video clips, or they are lower quality throughout the video compared to normal, that can't really be helped when dealing with what are comparatively tiny brands like this. As ever, thank you for watching. If you've enjoyed what you've seen or found it informative, consider dropping the video a like and subscribing if you want to see more content like this.